Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another episode of First Impressions, the video series where I discuss films, either ones that are still in their theatrical run, or ones that I've been meaning to watch for a while, and I finally get around to watching, and give my initial thoughts on. Today, it is the film that I really had in mind when I set out to do a Stephen King-themed version of Monster Fest. It is the only Stephen King-directed AC/DC soundtrack horror film about killer about killer big rigs. It, of course, is Maximum Overdrive, the only film Stephen King directed, and a film that has been lambasted, I think, unfairly. I mean, it got a couple Razzie nominations, once for Worst Director for King, and one for Worst Actor for Emilio Estevez, that is. And its critical reaction overall, outside of this, was negative. 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. Leonard Maltin gave it a bomb rating. And King in later years has said that he thinks it was the worst adaptation of his work and called it a moron movie, which I will respectfully disagree with to a point. Now, this is definitely the definition of a popcorn movie, but it's an intentional one. I mean, it's a horror comedy, so there is going to be some comedy in there for it to have that moniker. Some of it's a little dark, some of it actually is very funny. Like, just the opening scene where Stephen King does his cameo when he goes, "Honey, this machine just called me an asshole." That should tell you what type of film to expect. It's going to be a film with implausible stuff. There is some horror in there, and there is comedy. Now, the short story it's based on is his short story Trucks, which King published in his collection Night Shift. Now, for those of you who have only seen the movie and haven't read the story, the movie is pretty faithful to the short story. Now, there are going to be some deviations because it's a 90-minute movie and it's like a 10, 11-page short story. Now, the middle chunk of the movie is where most of the plot from the story is transferred over, where they're stuck in the diner, a couple things happen, some guy who got hit survives, happens to be a traveling salesman. The bulldozer eventually comes in and attacks, and they end up having to pump gas in the trucks. That's the essence of the short story, because it ends in a typical early King downbeat ending, which the story does earn, and the narrator is thinking something, and it's basically like he sees the planes going over the top of the sky, and he's thinking, I really hope there's people in them, but he somehow doubts it, which there is a mild reference to that at one point in the movie. The movie essentially takes the essence of this short story and expands on it, because whereas the story is all set at the diner, we see other stuff. We see a Little League team get attacked by a soda machine shooting cans, and a steamroller shows up, and this is where you can see this film does have some balls, because a kid gets run over by a steamroller. You gotta love that. Granted, we don't see no blood and gore splat out because it's a kid, and I think the MPA would have had a field day with that. But it's still effective. What we see is like, ooh, this is good. Of course, like I mentioned, King's cameo, that's funny. Opening scene, we see one of those bridges that folds up as the machines are taken over. That leading to a big old accident. And as you can guess from that, it's not just automobiles like big rigs and steamrollers and bulldozers that are taken over like in the short story. Every machine. At one point we see an electronic knife turn on, soda machine, pinball machines, electronics on the outside of restaurants. Any type of machine that could come alive like this comes alive, which adds on to it. Now, unlike the short story, we actually do get a quasi-answer for why this could be, because the opening narration in the form of subtitles mentions that the Earth is passing through the tail of a comet, which is one of the answers given in another horror film. That one's more of a classic. That's the original Night of the Living Dead. Of course, that's more of a potential answer instead of a definite answer, whereas here it's more likely a definite answer, especially with the little revelation about aliens in the end, which I think the aliens bit was a little unnecessary. Other than that, I don't really have any major other than the alien thing being, a little unnecessary, I don't really have any major issues with the film. If there was any nitpick, it's probably that the wife character in the Newlyweds can be annoying at times, but given the situation that they're all finding themselves in, I find it a little understandable. But I can understand if other people hate her character with a burning passion. Most of the characters I did like. Hingel's character, of course, is a bit of an asshole, but he's such a good actor. He plays it so convincingly that he's a character you kind of like to hate, though you do question why he has a rocket launcher and other military weapons in a diner. That's the one part where some people will probably look at this and go, yep, there's Stephen King on his good old cocaine again. Cocaine! Which, of course, I think that's the main reason why King distances himself from this film now. But I just chalked it up to self-effacement. I really do wish King could have directed more films. He's still alive, so maybe in the years to follow he might, but I don't think he will unless someone manages to coax him out of it. But with the diner thing, you can also look at it as being part of his character's backroom deals, and given how much of a sleazeball his character is with work-related stuff, I wouldn't put it past him. It's just, that's more subtext and stuff that's actually stated in the film, and it could just be me thinking of that, but, that's just the way I approach it. All the characters are likable to a point, especially Estevez's character. He's the protagonist of the film. You really did root for him, want to see him succeed. You really do kind of feel sorry for the situation he's in, especially when Hingel's trying to exploit him. And then, when trucks start attacking people, it's like, okay, now everyone's messed up. And given that it's not just trucks, but all machinery coming to life to attack people, yep, they're up that creek without a paddle. And of course, in the end, when they finally do successfully escape and get away from all these machines, you root for them. That's the type of film this is. You're just like, yeah, we want to see the hero succeed. This original story's downbeat ending, I don't think it would have worked for a horror comedy. It could have if you constructed it properly, but it might have been one of those things that oh man, and just takes the film down. If it was a straight up horror film 100% with maybe a little bit of dark comedy, then it would have worked. If it was a short film as part of an anthology or a standalone short film, then it could have worked. But as a longer film drawn out this way, yeah, we want to see the heroes survive. And this is definitely not an artsy film, so I can understand to a point why the critics hated it, but at the same time it's like, really? Just because it's not really a really artsy film, or one of Stephen King's films that have more of a higher point or more meaning, like Misery or even Dolores Claiborne, stories like that. It is a fun film. You're just looking at the plot of the film, it's a film that is as advertised. It's a film about killer monster trucks and humans trying to survive them. You could do an artsy film on that, but it might have just been boring and pretentious crap. It is the definition of a popcorn film, and I guess a lot of the critics just didn't enjoy it. So them hating it because they didn't enjoy it, yeah, I can understand that, but just one of the reasons I don't really like to trust critic reviews until after I see a film, whether I agree with the reviews or not. It's like, alright. But yeah, I just don't really like trusting them. I that's one of the reasons I go more off people I know, especially if their film tastes are similar to mine, because then I know more or less that it's going to be more accurate than a critic, which I think is kind of a little funny considering that one of my aspirations is to be a film critic, but I plan, if I successfully get in there, I'm not going to be pretentious about it. Alright, little mini rant over. Definition of a popcorn film, like I said. If you are a fan of Stephen King films and you haven't seen it yet, definitely comes with my recommendation, but note, like I said, it is what type of film you would expect it to be as a horror comedy film directed by Stephen King with AC/DC doing the music about killer monster trucks. Like it or hate it, that's what it is. As for me, I could say I could definitely see this film in the running when I do the top 10 Stephen King films. At least in my opinion. I could definitely see it being in the running for the top 10. I don't know if it would be towards the middle or towards the bottom of the top 10, but I could definitely see it in the running. It's one of those things I gotta watch more of the films and then actually construct a list and then narrow it down and then write it out. Probably make an interesting Mar Talks one day down the road. Maybe that might be next Halloween's Mar Talks. We'll just wait and see.